Welcome to another episode of It Takes a Viking, the official podcast of the Salem State University alumni and friends community. My name is Mike Mitchell, Director of Engagement here at Salem State. Season 5, very excited to welcome a graduate from the class of 1993, the founder and executive director of the Amazon River Dolphin Conservation Foundation, Suzanne Smith. Welcome to the show. It's such a treat to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Mike. I'm very excited to be here.
So when we had the opportunity to talk, I think you have quite possibly one of the most unconventional paths that I would kind of imagine to the work that you're doing. I mean, everything that you shared with me. So I loved everything that you told me in terms of how you get started. I can't wait to share it with everybody that's watching. So the first question that I always like to ask guests on the show is, what brought you to Salem State and how did you end up here?
I went to Salem State. I applied there because they had a great reputation for their marine biology program, which, as you know, takes a turn about halfway through my journey. But that is exactly why I went to Salem State. I was thrilled to be accepted there, and off I went to Salem, Mass.
And as you mentioned, your path somewhere along the way took an unconventional turn. So let's talk about that. Your move from kind of marine bio into what you ended up doing, and then we'll dive into what led you to where you are today.
Okay. Well, like we had talked about before, I had always wanted to work with dolphins. That was the path that I was on, and that's why I wanted to study marine biology. I was led to believe, and I probably thought on my own too, that was the natural course of action. So I went to Salem State and hit the ground running as a marine biology major, and was taking all kinds of classes that also included things like organic chemistry, inorganic chemistry, and physics, and things that weren't necessarily my forte, was not necessarily my strength in school. And I hit a pretty bad crossroads after my sophomore year, and Salem State had sent me those dreaded letters of, possibly being let go from school because of, a lack of academic success, to put it nicely. And I was devastated. I didn't know what to do. So I went to a very trusted professor and just to ask his advice. He was a professor of comparative vertebrate anatomy, and I said, "What am I going to do? All I want to do is work with dolphins, and I'm not doing well in any of my marine biology courses." And he is the one who said to me, "Well, did you ever think of psychology?" And it had never occurred to me. I didn't even think it was a possibility. And when we spoke about it, it really made a lot more sense, because what I wanted to study about with dolphins was their behavior. So that professor at the time kind of helped get through a lot of red tape for me, and went to his buddy, who was the department chairperson of the psychology department, and I changed my major, became a Dean's List student every semester there afterwards, and I've been working with dolphins for almost 40 years now.
So that's a specific, I mean, to say that I always knew that I wanted to work with dolphins, one in and of itself is specific, but then to further say I wanted to study their behavior, what led to that being such a passionate pursuit for you?
Growing up in and around Boston, my dad always had a boat. So we were always out in Boston Harbor. And one of my very first jobs is I had my own lobster pots that I had to take care of all by myself as a 12-year-old kid. But I would always see dolphins of all kinds. You've got Atlantic white-sideds out there. We've got harbor porpoise. And of course, we've got the larger baleen whales. So I was really always fascinated by marine mammals. I can't ever remember being interested in anything else. So I was pretty clear on my path. Just didn't know kind of the twists and turns that it would take along the way to get there.
And you had spent some time working in the aquarium, you had said as well, right?
I did. I started
Yeah.
working at New England Aquarium when I was in high school. And then I continued that when I was at Salem State. And I even got to be a part of a work study program. And of course, being in Salem, you take the blue line right down to New England Aquarium. So it was really easy to continue with that. So ended up racking up a lot of years of experience by the time I graduated.
And what would have been the equivalent of reimbursable miles, I would imagine too, if you were driving yourself there, you know what I mean? So,
For
um,
sure.
so you mentioned you make the transition to the psychology program, and then you begin to thrive academically, and things are going well. What is what does life after graduation, kind of those next few years, look like for you, and then kind of what made you finally? Because I think you've been at the foundation now for just about 10 years, right?
Yep,
So,
exactly,
um,
yeah.
what finally led you to the point where you said, "This is my next thing, and this is what I want to do, and now I'm going to start doing it." I'm just
Yeah,
curious.
so right when I graduated Salem State, I had I had my 4-year degree. I had a bachelor's in psychology and a minor in biology because of all those other courses that I had started taking out. And I had 6 years of experience working at New England Aquarium. So I had a job waiting for me in Gulfport, Mississippi, working as a dolphin, sea lion, and bird trainer. So I went down to Gulfport, Mississippi, which is worlds apart culturally, geographically, from Boston, Massachusetts.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Uh, so a little bit of a culture shock, leaving home state for the first time. Um, but just knew that that was where I was meant to be, loved working with the animals, and just continued in that field for many, many years. And then I was a part of a conservation project. I was invited to go to Brazil to help out with a fish conservation project. And, I was there to support a friend. And while they did their fish things, once we were done, I would go and kind of learn about these freshwater dolphins that were there, and they are pink. And it was just very fascinating to me. So the more I kind of asked questions, I just kind of fell deeper and deeper into love with it. And so one year in 2014, I came back from Brazil, and I did a research on how to start a nonprofit, and Amazon River Dolphin Conservation Foundation was born, and it has been running for 10 years now. So I go down to Brazil about 4 times a year and study the Amazon River dolphin.
So let's dive into that because that's such a specific name too, as opposed to just a dolphin conservation foundation. So, what is the Amazon River dolphin? Why choose that particular species of dolphin to
So they
study?
are so for, just on looks alone, they are the most prehistoric looking creature that I have ever seen. As much as I love them, I have been known to say they do have a face that only a mother could love. um, but they have these really long rostrums and these little beady eyes, and they're pink. I mean, it's they're just they're just fascinating. And I was just very curious, when they're coming and where they're going, because they do swim in the flooded Amazon rainforest, which I just think is super cool. And I just wanted to know more about them. Since then, they have been declared an endangered species, which just furthers the point that they need to be studied, and they need help.
In your journey to where you are now in this process, what has been and maybe it was that those first couple of years at Salem where you might have felt discouraged, saying, I only want to work with dolphins, and if I can't do that, I'm going to be disappointed. But what's been kind of the biggest challenge/failure that you've had along the way, and what did it teach you? What did you learn from it?
Um, Certainly, I think you hit the nail on the head because that was really just the beginning of it all, right? Um, so learning that, it was the only thing I wanted to do, and I was crushed. Like what, there isn't anything else I want to do. I don't know how to overcome this hurdle, because I was bad. I was bad at those classes. I was really bad. So, I mean, thank God for Dr. Harris's. Bless his soul, rest his heart. Um, so it taught me, I think, to persevere, and sometimes the road less traveled is kind of the way to go. Um, I didn't know at the time that psychology was an option, and it's funny because there are a lot of people that now want to take this path and want to be in this industry that do actually have psychology degrees. That's kind of been there's kind of been a shift in that they can still study biology, zoology, things of that nature.
You touched on something that is, as I continue to have these conversations with people and learn their stories and more about them, there's a commonality that exists through all of them, is that you understand where you're starting and you determine what your end goal is. And you say, I recognize that from A to B, it may not be a straight line. There's going to be some deviations and some turns along the way. I want to go back for a moment because you said kind of one of your first experiences was down in Mississippi doing training for birds, sea lions, and dolphins. What are some of the applications that you were training these creatures for?
So I've purposely set my career to have different experiences and work with them in different settings. So in that particular case, it was the very typical kind of show atmosphere. We were doing dolphin and sea lion shows all day, every day for the public. So there was that. And then I went on to other things where we were doing interactions with the dolphins where you could get into the water with them. We worked with children who had disabilities as well. And I also worked for the US Navy. I was a government contractor, and I trained dolphins and sea lions for different Navy tasks. A lot of people don't realize that that the Navy has dolphins and sea lions, but it
And
was
that was,
very cool to work open ocean with those animals.
and you had done that out in the California area, right? If I remember
Correct. I
correctly.
did that out in
Yeah.
San Diego. Yes.
Okay. So I want to also just touch on something else that you said too. You had mentioned that you're starting to see a more prevalent, um, I guess, presence of individuals in the field that don't necessarily have the marine bio background. So, um, psychology, obviously, one field. Are there other fields that you're seeing kind of a stronger presence in terms of degree of study and things like that that are entering the
I
field that
I think biology and psychology are the largest ones that you see. I did mention zoology.
Mhm.
There's certainly marine biology. There might be oceanography. So there are these little paths that you can take that to reach that end goal.
And I think it's important too to realize that, um, being that this is truly a labor of love for you, you are also in a role where you have to. You're the you're the leader, you're the head of the organization, but I also imagine to an extent that goes in two directions, right? So like you're focusing on the things that are happening with the dolphins down in the Amazon, but also you have to run this nonprofit on a day-to-day basis. So it's not like you get to just pack up and jump on the boat 4 times a year and disappear for a little while. Like you are still in the nitty-gritty of the daily operations. So understanding kind of that lens of approach, what does a day in the life as the executive director of the ARDCF look like? I mean, I'm imagining there's got to be some regulatory things you're probably working with, some philanthropic things that you're working with. Take me through a day in the life of your role.
Yeah, all of those. It totally one of the great things is that it's different every day. I'm constantly searching for grants that will fit, that ARDCF can fit into, and making sure I check all of those boxes. Is this a grant that I can apply for? And then going and writing all of those proposals. I certainly did not start off as a grant writer. I'm very thankful for my English 101 courses at Salem State. The Little Brown Book was everybody's Bible back then. So I do write a lot of grants now, and then there's also fundraising, which grant writing sort of is, because you want those funds, but just going out and finding donors and trying to make sure that we keep those donors. We can use little donations and we can use really big donations. We've got some of our projects require a lot of money, right? For example, we're trying to purchase a piece of unprotected land, or it's unprotected, and there are a lot of outside interests that are trying to obtain this land, and we want to preserve it. And not only are there, all kinds of primates and sloths and all kinds of beautiful birds that live in this area, but it's right on the river. And there are not only the river dolphins in that area, but there are also giant river otters and manatees. So that's kind of a big goal for 2025. We do have a lot of regulations. I do work, in Brazil. So trying to always work with federal agencies, state agencies, local researchers down in Brazil. So there's kind of a lot, keeping up with social media so people can learn about the foundation and help donate if they would like to, and just finding new ways to promote the foundation. And then when I go down there 4 times a year, two of those times, I actually run an eco trip on a boat. So I have up to 20 people come with me. They can sign up through our website, and I take them around the Amazon for 10 days. We live on a boat, and I show them our research and conservation areas. And it's not just about the dolphins. I show them everything. And then the other 2 times I'm down there doing research. So it definitely is a lot of moving parts.
Being out of school for a little while now and having some years under your belt and doing this, but with the benefit of hindsight, you mentioned English 101 for the grant writing stuff, but as you think back to your college education, do you wish there were classes that you had taken kind of back then that you would find a tangible benefit for you now?
That's a great question. I don't know. I really loved all of my psychology courses. And one of my favorite classes was a learning class. I'm forgetting the actual title of the course right now, but it was with Dr. Maggie Vaughn. And she only accepted 12 students per semester. And each one of the students got their own rat. And we had to train the rat for different tasks that she assigned us during the semester. And at the end of the semester, we had the option of taking home our rat. And I thought that class was fantastic. And I'm very, very lucky that I got into that course. So I think more courses like that, or making that more available to more students, would certainly be beneficial.
Well, you touched on kind of the use of the psychology for the behavior of animals, but psychology in general is the study of behavior, right? So
That's right.
as you're thinking about funders and community organizational partners and things like that, having that intellectual kind of wherewithal to say, not only can I train animals, but I'm well trained on how to work with people of all kinds as well. That had to have been pretty helpful along the way, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. Not only for people who I interact with here in the U.S., trying to get the organization running, but also, like I mentioned, the federal and state agencies, local researchers. I also interact very closely with Riverside communities, which is just amazing. And you need to have compassion and empathy because it's very different from our world here. It's very simple, it's very primitive. So I have to change my mindset, and I kind of have to watch them and take their lead and kind of and read their behavior, right? So I know where to fall into line.
I wanted to ask one other question about that class that you just mentioned. Well, I guess two
Yeah.
questions about that class. What was your rat's name, and did you take it home?
um her name was Moo because she was black and white. She was also the largest one in the class. um I could not take her home because I lived on campus,
Uh-huh.
and
Yeah. Rats in the
but
residence halls are generally discouraged.
generally frowned upon. One of my friends in my class, he took his home and additionally took Moo as well. So I got to visit on occasion.
Excellent. All right. We're always, because somebody's going to be watching this and going, "Well, what happened to the rat? Did it go home with her or not?" So that's good to know that Moo found a home after the class was over. Um, I like to ask this question, but based on how our conversation has gone since we've met, I feel like I probably know the answer to it already. But one of the things I'm always curious about when I talk to people is, if you weren't doing this, what you're doing now, what do you think you would be doing? Or could you, I guess, could you see yourself doing anything else? I mean, you've said you wanted to work with dolphins since you were a kid, but um,
Yeah, I don't think I can see myself doing anything else. But there are certainly a lot of different avenues within the animal industry. So it could be a more specific environmental job, or, um, wildlife trafficking is such a hot button right now. And I see it in Brazil. I mean, I see it in this country. I live in a building right now where 6 months ago there were two baby spider monkeys 3 floors down from me, and I almost had a heart attack. Um, so, but aside from that, I would probably be into some type of enforcement.
okay, that's an interesting take on it as well. I mean, if you couldn't be the conservator of the animals, then enforcing those who would try to harm the animals is
Mhm.
probably a logical second option, I guess. So that makes perfect sense. Um, Suzanne, just you're doing incredible work. I really, really am so impressed by what you're doing with your foundation down there. We've got the website on the screen now, and then several times throughout the interview. For if you're interested in learning more, visit ardcf.org. It's a fascinating foundation. They're doing incredible work. Suzanne, I really just want to thank you for your time. As I mentioned, you're a kind of a two-pronged approach to the work that you're doing. So I'm sure you're extraordinarily busy. Um, I'll continue to keep an eye on what you're doing. I can't wait to see what's next and learning more about your foundation and all the great things you're doing. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you,
Um,
Mike. I'm so glad you found me, and maybe we'll get to meet in person in the Amazon.
would love the opportunity. And again, for those that may be interested in learning more, I'm sure your website has interesting information if you're thinking about taking a cruise to the Amazon and learn more about the Amazon River dolphins. So, Suzanne, again, thank you so much. It was great talking with you. Visit ARDCF to learn more. And until next time, this has been another episode of It Takes a Viking, the official podcast of the Salem State University Alumni and Friends community. My name is Mike Mitchell, Director of Engagement here at Salem State. I want to thank everybody for watching.